My name is Shayan. My name is Ruby Ramsey, and I'm the executive. Future ahead of us. We want to re-envision the way we face our challenges and work together. We want you to look forward with excitement and adaptability. Let's embrace uncertainty together. And now, what we've all been waiting for, TEDx Amherst. Hello, my name is Ruby Ramsey, and I'm Hello, my name is Ruby Ramsey, and I'm the Executive Director of TEDx Amherst, an independently organized, student-run TED Talk event that hosts annual events to offer a platform for local voices to echo throughout and beyond the Pioneer Valley. It's my greatest pleasure to welcome you today to our first ever virtual event called Re-Envision. Our event in 2020 was supposed to be called Vision, but as the saying goes, COVID happened, and we had to postpone our event, so we thought the fitting name for this would be Re-Envision. At this event, you'll hear from many speakers that were supposed to give talks at our past event, but their talks have morphed and changed somewhat due to the tragedy and uncertainty we've experienced over the past 14 months. Our 7 speakers you will hear from today and tomorrow have fascinating ideas. They have all been champions working with the TEDx Amherst team to pull off such a successful event that is entirely virtual. I'm thoroughly impressed and grateful to be working with such fantastic people. I'm just as grateful to have worked on such a driven and unique team this year, despite the inability to meet in person. When we filmed the talks, that was actually the first time some people on the team had met in person. I'd also like to thank each and every one of our wonderful partners. If it wasn't for them, this event most definitely wouldn't have been able to happen. I'd like to thank the Eisenberg School of Management, the Center for Data Science at UMass, the UMass College of Engineering, Bueno y Sano, Amherst Works, Guayaquil, Own Practice, and Cabot. I'd also like to thank everyone who gave a personal contribution to the event, including Tony Morales. If you find yourself enjoying the event today and want to share the love, you can learn more about donating to the TEDx Amherst team on our website, which is tedxamherst.org. The schedule for the weekend's event can also be found on our website. It will also be shared throughout the event, so you know what to expect. Today, we will be hearing from 2 TEDx speakers, Denise Barstow and David Julian McClemens, and then you'll have the opportunity to attend a panel discussion on burnout in the post-pandemic workplace with panelists Shalini Ball, Kristen Lutz, and Ron Molina Brantley. Following that, we will hear from 2 more speakers, Shalini Ball and Maria Guarino, and a Q&A session with Maria will follow her talk. And lastly, we'll wrap up the day with some fun online networking. For the panels and networking, links will be shared in the YouTube live stream chat, as well as the email you purchased your ticket with. These links can also be found on our website. And with all of that, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you once again to TEDx Amherst Re-Envision event. The past 14 months have been anything but certain, and our goal today is to offer you a positive outlook on the future ahead of us. We want to re-envision the way we face our challenges and work together. We want you to look forward with excitement and adaptability. Let's embrace uncertainty together. And now, what we've all been waiting for, TEDx Amherst 2021 Re-Envision.
Hi, my name is Walt, and I'm a partnership curator on the TEDx Amherst team. Denise Barstow is part of the 7th generation on her family's dairy farm. Barstow's Longview Farm has been caring for their herd of 600, providing nutritional food, stewarding open space, and preserving a time-honored way of life for over 200 years in scenic Hadley, Massachusetts. Denise creates on-farm educational programming and offers farm tours to learners of all ages, building farm memories and educated consumers to help sustain the traditions of dairy in New England. Denise is passionate about the impact regional dairy has in community, nutrition, sustainability, and nature. So, without further ado, Denise Barstow.
Always know where your feet are. This is something I grew up hearing from my dad. I'd run through the barns barefoot and race straight through a cow pie, or stub my toe on a rock and topple over, and I'd hear him say, "Know where your feet are." How did he even see that? This lesson has stuck with me. Know where your feet are, know the community in which you're rooted, connect with the literal earth that you stand on, care for your foundation. Even as we build on top a life, an economy, we always need to be reinforcing and restoring our foundation, because when you have a strong and healthy foundation, everything built on top will grow and thrive. A dairy farmer's favorite shape is a circle. A closed-loop system is a supply chain that uses the same materials over and over again to make something new. It's a practice that conserves natural resources, minimizes waste, and nourishes the foundation of the business. Dairy farmers and their cows have been closing loops for millennia. The cow eats from the land, fertilizes the soil, and makes more food to eat. Each step along the way only makes the next one healthier. Healthy cow, healthy land, healthy food. The most important part of any dairy farm is, of course, the herd. We couldn't do our work of producing food for our community without them. This sign on the farm serves as a constant reminder that they're the foundation of our business. Our cows, our girls, are our highest priority, always. Not a day has gone by where we didn't feed, milk, and tend our animals. Every weekend, every Christmas morning, every day for 215 years. On my family farm, we're always doing our darndest to keep up with best practices and the newest technology. We provide the best nutrition, feed raised from the land that we farm. We keep the barns clean and cozy and comfortable in all seasons. We work closely with our veterinarian, nutritionists, and hoof care specialists to monitor animal health. And to provide our girls with the most autonomy in their day, we use a robotic milking system. Each cow sets her own schedule, lounging, eating, socializing, or coming to milk when she's ready. The robotic milkers make us more efficient with our labor. Our cows are producing better quality milk and more of it. And we've reduced our feed and vet bills thanks to better data. The robotic milkers help us produce better milk for our community, better meet our bottom line as a business, all while providing the best possible care for our herd. Our animals are the foundation of our family farm, and we must nurture our foundation if we want everything built on top to thrive. So a dairy farmer's favorite shape is a circle. I've become concerned with another shape that seems to be growing in popularity, the line. This shape doesn't do much to regenerate or restore our foundation. You send your money out of your community, they send you what you ordered. It's a pretty linear transaction, a broken loop in the circle. Let's say you come to our family farm stand for a sandwich. This is our Shermanator, our most popular menu item. Some of your purchase will go toward the ingredients that made the sandwich. The cheese from Cabot, Vermont, the tomatoes from Forex Farm in Hadley. Some of your purchase will go toward state and local taxes, which is cool because you live here and it's nice to have nice schools and roads. Some of your Shermanator purchase is going to go into the pockets of the people that made your sandwich, and that's good because they live here too, and we want them to be able to buy things like food and state park passes, things that connect them with this place that they live, or to help them pay for their nursing degree at the local community college. And then some money will go back into the business that you bought it from. This is going to pay for maintenance and restaurant stuff, but we're on a farm here. So you're helping to feed and care for our cows, our land, and our soils, and our family. Maybe you used a credit card, so those processing fees are going to head down to the CEO's offshore bank. But otherwise, all your money stayed right here in New England, where you live, in the place that you love. Each of those farms and businesses and people create their own closed loops in your community, looping together like weaving a fabric. The stronger that fabric, the stronger the local economy, the stronger your foundation. Money moves like nutrients in the soil. It needs to cycle and move throughout if we want an economy to survive and thrive. Farms and businesses and services in the Pioneer Valley need reliable inputs to make meaningful investments in our community. When my grandpa retired at the age of 70, he was working 65 hours a week and went down to just 30 hours a week. And what he loved to do most was garden. He'd spend hours in the garden, May through October, in all conditions, bent over, hoeing the earth, weeding and tending the family garden. Come April, he'd take a wheelbarrow full of composted cow manure and fold it into the dirt, feeding the soil that would grow the seeds he'd pull from his pocket and plant in the ground. We must nurture our foundation if we want everything on top to grow. Like most area farms, Barstow's Longview Farm implements a number of practices to elevate soil health in the Pioneer Valley. We use rotational cropping and plant cover crops, restoring nutrients in our fields. A few years ago, we transitioned to 100% no-till planting on all 450 acres of our farmland. Tillage has been used for centuries all over the world, annually turning soil ecosystems on their head and releasing carbon stored in the earth back into the atmosphere. The solution? No-till planting reduces soil erosion, maintains biodiversity, and keeps the soil intact while making it like a sponge for water and carbon retention. This is a climate-forward way to plant crops, and it's happening in your front yard. Nurture your foundation if you want everything on top to grow. Alternately, farmers know that poor soil practices degrade our foundation. Tillage, overgrazing, poor manure management all cause runoff of topsoil and nutrients, which pollutes our waterways, destroys our soils, and makes our region less climate resilient and food secure. It's similarly poor practices that degrade our local economy. There's a one-way conveyor belt that takes money from the foundation and sends it down the river. Nutrient runoff, as a soil scientist may say. Credit card processing fees, heavily lobbied legislation, online shopping takes money from our economy and sends it out of our communities. Nurture your foundation if you want everything on top to grow. Meanwhile, for every dollar generated from dairy farming, it turns over 3 times in the local community. Almost 2/3 of Massachusetts farm supply and service expenditures are spent in the state. Repairs, vet care, supplies, equipment, and seed. Dairy farmers take the long view and are stewards of our local economies, investing in our family farms for the next generation and the generation after that, making decisions today with our scope set for 200 and 300 years away. When we have more farms around, it makes it a good place to open a farm-to-table restaurant, to set up your repair shop, or begin your vet business. But when we lose farms in the area, the collective voice of farmers is quieter. The legislators stop listening. The tractor dealership moves to a more rural community. The grain truck makes less frequent stops. Farmland is built on. It makes it harder for the remaining farms to run an efficient business, so they might shut down too. Look, buying local is not a novel concept. We all know we should support our local farms and businesses, but it's time we also recognize the hidden costs of not spending dollars locally and sending them elsewhere. As consumers, we could buy cheap stuff now and replace it in a couple years, but some things are hard to replace. Soil health, sense of community, the many, many loops in the fabric of a local economy. We have to pay for what things are worth and see the value beyond what we hold in our hand. There's a lot more value in, say, a gallon of local milk than just being an affordable, healthy, nutritious food. That purchase, that gallon of milk, is an investment in conserved open space, clean air and groundwater, wildlife habitat, a deep connection to New England heritage, and a more food-secure, climate-resilient Massachusetts. There's the reason a dairy farmer's favorite shape is a circle. It leaves us all feeling more whole. From the cows and the soil to the farms, businesses, and school systems, nurture your foundation, sustain your community, and everything grown within it will thrive. Thank you.
My name is Cheyenne, Speakership Curator for TEDx Amherst, and I am honored to introduce our next speaker, Dr. David Julian McClements. He is a distinguished professor at the Department of Food Science at the University of Massachusetts. His research uses basic principles of physics, chemistry, and biology to improve the quality, healthiness, safety, and sustainability of the modern food supply. McClements received his PhD in food science at the University of Leeds in ultrasonic spectrometry. He then did his postdoctoral research at the University of Leeds, University of California, Davis, and University College Cork. McClements is the sole author of 3 books, published over 1,100 scientific papers, and is currently the most highly cited author in food science. Please welcome Dr. David Julian McClements.
We're living in the golden age of science. We've all witnessed how science and technology has transformed our lives with the sort of development and rollout of the COVID vaccines over the past year. And today what I'd like to do is show how science can also be used to change our foods into disease-fighting medicines. And I'm going to do that by telling you a story that begins on my plate of my granny's carrots and ends up with how advanced nanotechnology can turn those carrots into foods that might stop you going blind. So when I was growing up, I grew up in a small industrial town in the north of England. And my mother and father both worked. So they would send me to my granny's, who lived in a beautiful cottage in the Yorkshire countryside. My brother and I would play all day long on the village green and come back exhausted and hungry. And my granny always had a plate of delicious northern food there. We would have roast beef, Yorkshire puddings, and a pile of vegetables. And that would be followed by a stack of beautiful home-baked cakes that my granny had made. But she'd never let us eat the cakes until we'd finished the vegetables. And when I was a kid, I was very inquisitive, and that's probably why my mum and dad always used to send me to my granny's for the summer. And I was always asking questions. So I'd ask my granny, why do we have to eat the vegetables? And she would say, because they're good for you. And I said, well, why are they good for you? And she'd say, they're good for your eyes. And I said, well, why are they good for your eyes? And she would say, rabbits eat carrots, but have you ever seen them wearing glasses? And I thought, she's right, I hadn't. So I thought, let's leave it at that. Since then, my research is actually exactly on that area, is how to change foods into disease-fighting medicines. It turns out my granny was right. If you look at carrots, they do contain some molecules that can be good for your eyes. And these molecules are called carotenoids. And that's because they were first found in carrots. But they're also found in other fruits and vegetables. So things like peppers and kale and other foods. And as well as giving the desirable color to these fruits and vegetables, so like the red, the yellow, and the orange color, they also are supposed to be able to prevent diseases. So they can act like natural antioxidants in your body. And they're also being claimed to be able to prevent things like cancer and heart disease and inflammation. But how do they actually help your eyes? If you look at the back of your eye, there's this region which is called the macula. And the macula is really important for seeing clearly. If your macula gets damaged, you go blind. And if you look in the macula, it's packed full of carotenoids. So these health-promoting food components have to get in your eye in order for you to be able to see clearly. So what we want to do is, how can we start with a carrot, so something like this, how can we get the carotenoids from this carrot into the back of your eye? So what we need to do is we need to look at the journey they take. So this is the normal journey that a carotenoid would take from a carrot to the back of your eye. So first of all, you have to chew the carrot. So this is a picture of my daughter chewing a carrot, and that breaks it down. And then it goes through your gut. And when it gets into your gut, it breaks down further, and it releases the carotenoids. And they go into your bloodstream, and then they're carried through to your eye. And that might seem like a pretty straightforward journey, but in reality, it's very arduous. And most of the carotenoids in the carrot would never actually get to the back of your eye. And this is where we're trying to use the latest advances in nanotechnology to improve the amount of carotenoids that get into your eye. So what we're doing is we're trying to trap the carotenoids in these tiny fat particles, and we create these fat particles using nanotechnology. So these particles, we're taking regular size food ingredients and shrinking them to tiny sizes. So this is a lot like the comics that I used to read as a kid when I stayed at my granny's. And one of them I read was Ant-Man. So Ant-Man started off as a regular size and then was shrunk down to a tiny size. And when he was small, he could do things that he couldn't do normally. It also reminds me of one of the movies I used to watch when I was a kid. This was a science fiction film. And I used to watch this probably at my granny's cottage in northern England, where it rained most afternoons. So I would sit and watch science fiction films. And this was one called The Fantastic Voyage. And in this film, they took some scientists and shrank them to a tiny size and put them in this tiny little craft and then injected them into a body of a really important person who had a clot in his brain. So that craft would carry the scientists through the body and protect them until they got to the brain and they could carry out the operation. So by being made really, really tiny, they could do things that a normal human being couldn't do. And we're trying to do exactly the same thing, but we're trying to do it using our nanofat to encapsulate these carotenoids and carry them through the human body so they get to your eye. So now I just want to give you an idea how small these nanoparticles are that we're dealing with. So we all know what the size of a pea is. A pea is, pretty small. But our nanoparticles are like 100,000 times smaller than a regular pea. So if you shrank them down, they would be so small you couldn't even see them with a microscope. They're that small. And to just give you an idea, if you try to pack this pea with these nanoparticles, and you could put 1 nanoparticle in the pea per second, which would be really quick because it'd be very difficult to actually find one, guess how long it would take? It would take 32 million years to fill up this pea. So that just shows you how tiny these particles really are. So now what I want to do is, how do we actually make these nanoparticles? Well, let's start with some sort of conventional particles that we can all make in our kitchen. So imagine that you were trying to make a salad dressing, and you wanted to put it onto your salad. So you would take some vinegar, you would take some fat, and a little bit of egg, and you would whisk them up, or you would use a blender in your kitchen, and you would make something that's called an emulsion. And an emulsion has got these small fat droplets which are surrounded by water. So we haven't done anything special now. This is just normal fat that you would get in your food every day. So how do we take that normal fat and nanosize it? Well, we can use a specialized device called a homogenizer, where we take the regular fat, we put it through this device, and it smashes the fat droplets together to form really, really tiny nanofat. So this homogenizer is like a regular kitchen blender with superpowers. So now I've shown you how we can make this nanofat. How can we actually use that to improve our health? So what we can do is we can take a regular food, like a fruit or vegetable which has got carotenoids in, and we can take the carotenoids out. And the fruits and vegetables we use are typically the ones that we're not going to eat. So these are like the damaged ones or the ugly-looking ones that nobody wants to buy. So now we can convert this sort of waste stream into a valuable food ingredient that can actually be used to improve your health. So once we've got the carotenoids out of the fruits and vegetables, we put them into our nanofat, and then we put that nanofat into some kind of food product. So it could be something like a smoothie like this. So this would be our nanofat with the carotenoids in, and we would just drink a little bit of it every morning. So now I want to show you the power of nanotechnology. And this is some of the experiments we've done in my lab. And this is where we've compared something called the bioavailability of the carotenoids in different kinds of foods. So one of them is just if you just take a regular carrot. So if I just took this carrot and ate it, most of the carotenoids that were in it would never get into my body. They would just pass straight through and into my toilet. So they would have a low bioavailability. Very little would be absorbed. If I ate this carrot with a little bit of regular fat, like a regular salad dressing, some of the fat would get into my body. But if I used our nanofat, you would get much, much more of these carotenoids into our body and into my eye, and therefore it could help prevent us getting diseases. So why, if we eat a regular carrot, does very little of the carotenoids actually get into your body? So the reason for this is when we eat the carrot gets broken down into small pieces in our body, then it travels through our gastrointestinal tract, and most of it doesn't get absorbed because some of the carotenoids get trapped in the little chunks of carrot, and the ones that do come out form these crystals, and these crystals just go straight through your gastrointestinal tract and into your toilet. So they can't have the benefits that we want. Now contrast what happens when we eat our sort of special nano food. So our nano food's got our little nanofat droplets in. We put it into our mouth, it goes straight down into our guts, and the nanofat gets digested very, very quickly, and the fat in our food gets converted to these little tiny nanoparticles, which are called micelles. So these are naturally produced in our body all the time from fat. And these micelles can take out the carotenoids from the carrot juice and trap them and then carry them to your guts. So these are our micelles. They're like a little tiny nanovehicle which has got our carotenoids trapped inside. And now they can travel through the fluids in our gastrointestinal tract and be absorbed by our cells. And these cells act like little factories. They take the carotenoids out of the micelles and then they repackage them into a new kind of nanoparticle. So this is another natural nanoparticle that your body always makes. And this one is called a chylomicron. And these chylomicrons are suitable for carrying the carotenoids through your bloodstream so they can actually get to your eye. So we've talked about a lot of complicated stuff so far, so let's just take stock. What we've said is we create nanofat to trap the carotenoids inside, and then we eat them and they go into our body and they get converted into the micelles in our guts. So that's another kind of nanoparticle. And then they get absorbed by our body and converted into another kind of nanoparticle called a chylomicron, and then they can travel through our bloodstream. So what we're doing is very similar to what like an online shopping company like Amazon is doing. If you order something from Amazon, it comes from a great big warehouse, and then it's traveled across the country through different types of transport. We might have a truck, we might have a van, and we might have whatever this little guy at the end is called. And then it's going to arrive at your house, and you're going to pick it up and take it into your house. But we're trying to do exactly the same thing in your body. But instead of having a warehouse, the food is like the warehouse that's got lots of different health-promoting molecules in, including the carotenoids. And again, just like the trucks and the vans, we have these different types of nanoparticles which act like little vehicles which carry it from the food through our guts and through our bloodstream. And then when it gets to our eye, we have specialized devices in our cells which can actually take the carotenoids and take them into your eye, just like when you pick up a box that's on your doorstep when your Amazon package arrives. So if you ever order something expensive from Amazon, you often see the person who delivers it take a photograph of it, and they want to make sure that this package has actually arrived at your house. And we want to do the same thing. If we have given you this nano food, and you've got these carotenoids gone through your blood and into your eye, we want to show that the carotenoids actually got to your eye. As I said at the beginning, we live in a really exciting time for science, the golden age of science. And scientists have used the latest developments in optics to create these machines where they can actually measure the amount of carotenoids in the back of your eye. So that's really incredible. They don't do any damage to your eye. They don't have to do any operations or anything like that. So what we want to do now is we want to use this new technology to try and improve the world. So if you look at the global population, like all over the world, people are living longer, which is a fantastic thing. And my granny was one of these really lucky people. So she lived to the age of 94. But as she got older, she became more and more susceptible to different kinds of diseases. And one of the diseases that she got when she got older is she couldn't see clearly. She became partially blind. And this is true for lots of people when they get older. And this is due to a disease which is called macular degeneration. So normally, when you're younger, you have a healthy macula. But as you get older, your macula becomes diseased. And that means you can't see clearly. In fact, what it's like is something like I'm showing here. You can't see what's in front of you. And this is a very common disease. There's over 200 million people in the world have currently got this disease. But it's not just a disease for people in other countries. This is a disease that affects us all. So if you're lucky enough to live to 75, and a lot of us will be because we're living longer, you've got a 1 in 3 chance of getting this disease. And if you can see here, you can't see, you couldn't see your grandchildren if they were in front of you, or you couldn't drive a car to the supermarket. So what might end up is you will end up in a care home. So what we would like to do is to use our nano-powered foods to try and treat this disease and stop it from happening. So you may just take a little shot of a drink like this every morning, and it stops you getting this terrible disease. So I think we're in a really exciting place. We have nanotechnology to deliver these carotenoids to our eye. We have special machines that can measure the carotenoids in your eye. So now what we'd like to do is to be able to test our hypothesis and show that these nano-enabled foods can actually work in the real world and that they're safe and effective. So this is just like the people who've developed the COVID vaccines have had to do the same thing. So today I've taken you on a journey that started off with a plate of my granny's carrots and ended up showing you how the most advanced nanotechnology is being able to turn those carrots into disease-fighting foods that might prevent you going blind. So it turns out my granny was probably right. Carrots do contain something that can stop you going blind. And that's probably why you never see rabbits wearing glasses. Thank you.
Especially students. I
This
speak on
meeting
behalf
is
of the
being
students.
recorded.
The difference between being stressed out and being burnt out.
But also I have to make sure I nurture and give the kids as much as I could. And then I realized that I was doing, my life started flipping a little bit much. My work life balance had been kind of shifted. I wasn't working, my productivity level was really down, and then that started to stress me out. So then what did I do? I shift completely the other direction. And then what did my kids do? They shifted with me. So that they were underneath my desk, they were on top of my desk, they were with me in my Zoom calls. They were with me in the bathroom. I just couldn't get away. So it was really stressful. It was one of the harder times I've ever dealt with in my life. And then I was like, just told my boss, I'm doing the best I can. And this is not easy. It wasn't easy. What I did is just do what I normally do, just hunker down and do the best I can, and kind of failed at both. But I don't think, if I look back, I was a little harder on myself, because I think the kids turned out pretty well overall. They didn't miss. I did as best I can. I started Daddy Day School because when you're in preschool, you didn't have school, so I just did structured time with the kids, and then it worked. They were getting stimulated mentally. We went for walks. So my job just went from a 9 to 5 to a 6 to 8 to a 4 to 7 to a 10 to 12. So it was really difficult. And then I realized, now that the pandemic is almost over and they're back at school, I kind of miss them. I miss having them yell at me during Zoom calls or give me an excuse to leave a Zoom call early. Get an excuse to walk and enjoy the outside weather for a walk. So overall, burnout has been tough. Stress has been tough. I'm not an expert at it. I don't know it from an academic standpoint, but I do know it from a personal one. And I'm really excited to tell my story of how I managed to get through this pandemic.
So I'm Shalini, and I'm a certified mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher and a Search Inside Yourself teacher, and also a researcher. So I'm going to dive right into what stress is. And stress is what I'm feeling right now, which I was just sharing because my TEDx talk is right next. And so stress can actually be a good thing, right? It stresses when the environment changes, there's something happening, and it's our body's natural response to adapt. So it's what gives us focus and energy to keep going, and it can be motivating. Burnout, on the other hand, is like if you keep going at that space, like if you keep that high level of excitement going, which sort of happened when I was preparing for the TEDx talk, because it was like 4 weeks of just go, 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 and sleeping really little and not taking care of myself. And so, because I was taking care of myself, I was able to go, 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 but that's what happens when we keep going without taking care of ourselves over a period of time. There's this exhaustion and depletion that can happen. And that's what leads to burnout. And very specifically in the pandemic, as I was working with some of the organizations, I think one important thing to remember is that we try to apply solutions, that we know. So organizations that hired me were like, oh, we've already tried stress management. Please don't teach us more techniques. And we're like, no, don't worry. We're not going to come in and teach you how to meditate. We first want to understand what are the causes and conditions, because different people, different organizations, different departments, even within the same organizations, were going through burnout because of different reasons. And one of the things that we found out that was sort of very familiar theme throughout the pandemic, a big reason for burnout was the lack of spaces for connection and talking about the stressful challenges. So stress is okay as long as people have the capacity and resources to deal with it, and they didn't have the natural spaces, like even students, first-year students starting college, and didn't have an opportunity to get to know, and they're already feeling uncomfortable and don't know who you are, you're trying to figure out, and then you're like, how do you navigate? And there's no space to really connect with each other. So that was a big theme. And then when we created the spaces for people and organizations, a big thing that came out again was we don't know how to ask for help. So it's seen as a sign of weakness. So if anyone feels stressed or burned out or overwhelmed, we feel like we have to plow through. And that just going on and not addressing it was another thing that really, so those are two things I'll say for now.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point. I think definitely as a student, I have noticed the just constant isolation that I think me and a lot of my friends and peers have felt this past couple semesters, and this like yearning for connection. And how now when I'm in even a small group, I just value it so much. And I'm so grateful to have moments of community. And I feel even more appreciative of that than I ever have been before, just because of the past 14 months of just like pure uncertainty. and not really knowing what's going to happen next. And as a college student, I feel like, you're just thrown into this space where you're supposed to be meeting people and you're supposed to be connecting with new people all the time. And so I think, I really feel for the freshmen that are starting college right now, or even, young kids that are in school right now, and their normal thing is playing on the playground and hanging out with their friends, and that's what they look forward to in school, and no one's really getting that. And so I feel like this constant feeling of isolation is so real. I want to talk a little bit more about elements that can contribute to burnout, just because I feel like there are so many things coming at us all the time. There's so much noise. And now that we have this world of technology, I feel like that adds a level. We have this ability. I was just talking to one of my team members the other day about how we have this ability to connect with anyone in the world instantly with the ability of technology. So it's like this weird dichotomy of, even though we're so connected right now, we all feel so isolated. And so I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit more about that, and your experiences with that.
Can I just jump in, right? Because
Absolutely.
you said that's such an important point, that we have the technology to connect with anyone, anywhere, anytime, right? And we all did that. Like with my parents, I was able to chant with them and do, like create new ways of meeting and whatnot. But the one very basic thing that causes burnout is not knowing how to connect with ourselves. And I say that in a way that, because I lived a big part of my life not connected with myself and just following rules, or being a good student, doing all of these things, and so you're just going, and you have these goals out there, and you have all these things you're doing out there. So a lot of our attention is out there, and then when the pandemic hit, it's again so overwhelming because we're being required to pivot and adjust and new ways. Like I can't really smell you or sense you or feel you, and so we're, like we have to learn to focus in a different way, and the body's like, the mind is going clunk, what's going on? And so in the midst of all this, just learning to return back to ourselves. And that's, actually an innate ability we have. I just got an email from the email is from the father of 11-year-old student. And so the 11-year-old student was leading mindfulness classes for his class. And the teacher wrote back to the parent that your 11-year-old was leading these meditations. And that's what kept the students going in the middle of the pandemic. That's one thing they look forward to. So just that ability to connect with ourselves. What do I need? What's most important right now? And how can I create conditions to make that happen? So that can be a really important aspect.
And I think, what I want to comment on is go back to something Ron said earlier about the connections that we have, right? So many of us, and I saw someone allude a little bit to this in the comments, so many of us, I've been bothered a lot lately with the sort of label of return to work, because so many people I know kept working the whole time, and they were physically around people, and the stress created from that, right? Our dissonance between how we want to take care of each other, what our beliefs were about the pandemic and the situation, our behavior choices, that the pressures created around that, all brand new social norms had to crop up overnight. We had to adapt and choose and find our place within those. And for those who were out in the workplace, in the community day to day, additional pressure and stress on them. And students, in some cases, were forced to go back, right? Or had to make a choice of go back into school or stay home and be remote. And those things were so hard on everyone. And that now there's a delayed reaction. So as we sort of emerge yet again into a new reknitting of our social fabric, what does that look like for different people of different classes, locations, situations, where now we have to continue to take care of each other, but in a different way. And so I think that, for me, I noticed shifts also in my own feeling and personality. Things that I would have loved and would have energized me before don't now. And I think somebody had a very funny meme they posted about the CDC says that it's okay still to call in and say that you don't want to show up, you want to stay home and read, something like that. And I thought, yes, I would love to stay home and read now. I don't need to do all the things I was doing before. So how do we recreate our student lives, our jobs, our careers, and even our family commitments with a new awareness of ourselves, perhaps, or even just a tenderness of, even if like I was a super extrovert, I may not get back to that point, but I also, it might take me a long time to get even closer to where I'm going to land in the end. So I think that's just something to note as we feel that like personal level of burnout, whether it's career burnout or identity burnout. I think I've also been hosting a lot of conversations on equity and justice, and just listening as a white cisgendered woman to people who don't have my lived experience, and how the burnout and the stress there is so different and heavy for other folks, that I am conscious of like, wow, just offering everybody a lot of support and grace as we try to return to ourselves and to hopefully a new society and the work that's going to come around that. So I don't know, I put all that out there to say like, it's in flux, right? And it's really raw and tender. And so just give people a wide berth for all kinds of choices. And that's how I'm rolling right now.
And for me, just to piggyback on a few things that were said, is I didn't realize with agreements I had with myself in terms of a work-life balance. I worked really hard, really hard. And then all of a sudden I was like, you know what, this is too much. This is not enough. One, I'm not working for myself. And two, everything was just starting to fall off. So I realized I didn't have any emotional intelligence when it came to looking at myself, because I'm a father first and a husband second. And then I realized, where's the time for me? It was pushed down behind the dogs. It was behind the house. It was behind mowing the lawn. There wasn't any time for me at all. Then I realized, if I do this, then one, unfortunately, I may not live too much longer, because I didn't realize what stress I was building up. I became irritable. I became unpleasant. My smile left. If anyone knows me, the first thing they recognize is my smile. It's like, yeah, I love to smile and it makes me feel good. And then after a while, it just started dissipating. It was just gone. And then me and my husband made a life decision. You know what? Let's just buy an RV. So we bought an RV. We became weekend warriors, and it's been something amazing. I work really hard Monday through Friday, but Friday afternoon comes, work. I'm unemployed. I don't think about work at all. I leave it at home, and then the kids love it. The only downside is I took my son out of soccer, because it's about commitments. And since we're gone every weekend, he couldn't really commit to it. But I'm like, I'm a soccer coach. So what do? I brought the soccer ball and our training stuff with us. We went to Lake George. We went to Maine. We're taking a trip down to Florida this year, actually next month. So I'm just really excited to see what the United States have in store for us. I want to go to this mom and pop shop and assimilate the economy that way, and get some great food and go hiking. We even bought a Red Fox Labrador to go with us. So we extended our family. So I'm really excited about what's in store for us in the future, because I realized stress and burnout was creeping up and it was right at my door. And then I had to do something about it.
Wow, I love that so much. I want to buy an RV.
Ron and I haven't talked in so long. Ron, we also bought one, and now our crews need to camp it out together. I am so excited for that. I can't even tell you.
Oh my God, my husband and I, who's here actually, he's been wanting to get an RV. So this is very encouraging.
Well, you don't even need one, because tents are very glamorous. And so you can just join in. Any of you all want to be outdoors with our crews, you're invited for some stress reduction and forest bathing, and maybe some hippie business with me. Who knows?
Oh, I love it so much. Wow. I think maybe that's what I'll do as soon as I graduate, is buy a van and just become a van lifer. I think you guys have inspired me. My parents are going to be really disappointed.
Please do not tell Mom this was my fault.
I think she's on this call, so. I really want to talk about how burnout affects our physical and mental health, and ways to combat that don't involve an RV, or just involve things that we can do without anything, no matter who we are, no matter where we live. I noticed some conversation in the chat about how not everyone is able to connect with everyone at every time. And I think that's a really good point. I'm definitely speaking on my own experience in life, which is a privileged one. And so I think just just strategies and ways that we can combat burnout and combat the stress of overworking ourselves with just our own person. I'm sure Shalini has a million things that she could talk about, but maybe we'll start there.
Do you mind if I start real quick?
Absolutely.
One thing that I did is I started every morning with meditation. Me, my husband, and my sister, we just start every morning at 6 o'clock. We get up and then we meditate for 20 minutes. And then after that, we have tea and talk. So that's just one thing that I did. And it's something that I found very valuable. And right now we're working on a meditation about anxiety. And I didn't realize that anxiety has different forms. And so I'm just working through that. So it's pretty exciting. So that's what I do. I meditate in the morning.
Yeah, I cannot say enough about meditation. And, sometimes people think of meditation as, I don't know, I have to empty my mind, or what is it? And there's so many different ways to do it. And I encourage people to find their own way to create situations where you can turn your attention inwards first, and learning to really examine what's happening in our bodies, what's going on, and for the purpose of insight and learning about how your mind works, because everything happens in the mind, right? The mind has the power to create and destroy. And so having that single ability for no matter how you do it, whether it's forest bathing or swimming or just looking out at the sky, the clouds, or just turning internally and stabilizing the mind, because by default our mind is running around. So even though it's our innate ability to turn inwards and connect with ourselves, but we also have a monkey mind that wanders. And so we do need some amount of training as we grow up to training, or I like to say play, create more playfulness where we can learn ways to stabilize the mind and turn attention inwards. One other framework that I think is really helpful is that once we stabilize the mind, is to really ask ourselves what's important. Whether you're going for a project or it's just your day in general, how do I want to show up and what can I do? So if you're a professor, for example, just like, what do my students need, and how can I show up for them? And so just setting these intentions are really, really helpful, that when we're feeling overwhelmed and what's going on, just that acts as an anchor to keep coming back. What's important now? So even though we're on Zoom and it's like, oh, I hate Zoom, I want to meet in person, but just asking ourselves, okay, what's important here is the people in this room right now who come from wherever, right? And so we are here in this moment. How can we show up for each other and really listen and take care of each other? So I think along with meditation, the intention setting is really important.
I'm an exercise nut and a plant nut, and I have a lot of animals. So I basically, for me, the benefits of working from home are just time to be with other living beings that, are not talking at me. Things that I don't have to use my brain. Somebody put in a chat about buying a guitar. I think that's brilliant. It activates different brain centers. I'm sure Shalini can talk more about what part of the brain, but I do know that music and other modalities of movement light up different brain centers. So for me, I always picture that I have this like super buff amygdala, from the stress habits over the years, and how, if you're raised or have had trauma in your life, I think as manager, I have taken a trauma-informed approach, and Ron knows this for years, but I do so even more now to recognize that we have a lot of healing to do. And so people need different ways, different bridges for that healing. And it's not a done job, right? You don't heal, get better, and then stop the healing. So I have just learned to work a lot less, be quiet a lot more, move a lot more, and try to drink less caffeine. Yeah. And if, it's just all of that, like that good, clean living, that's what you can do for free every day. And it makes a huge difference.
Can I add one more thing? Actually, there are four more things, but there's this quote that I really live by, which says that we're a house with 4 rooms, and physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And so spiritual is purpose, meaning. And, when I was listening to you, Kristen, that again reminded me of that, because so many of the things that you talked about, like movement and just plants or being out in nature, all of these things. And so if you really think about our lives and in terms of these four aspects, that's a really quick way to see where we go out of balance, because we can love what we do. I remember writing my book on mindfulness and creating this curriculum on a deadline. And I practicing and teaching and researching and writing about mindfulness got burned out because I was so focused on meeting that deadline that I ignored my emotional needs and to connect with people and physical needs. So I was so out of balance because I was just in my spiritual doing work that's meaningful and in my mind, that really led to a burnout. So really that's a very simple framework to look at. Okay, what do I need more of? Human connection, movement, or some more mental stimulation, intellectual stimulation, or what's the last one? Spiritual, meaning,
Can I add a tip
purpose.
for the young ones too? Because I have two. One is going to be a college first year student. The other's a high schooler, and married to a high school teacher. So for the youngs that are very digital, watch your media diet. So this is now me being a mom. I'm going to step in with my mom hat. I say this to the boys all the time. What does your feed look like? And I look at their feed and I scroll through and just get a sense of like the constant imagery that comes up. So like I deliberately scrub my Instagram and now it's like pets, plants, cute things, not like comparative things that are going to steal my joy. Right. So I definitely like unfollowed a lot of Garbaggio and added in beauty to my feed because there's so much great art and stuff happening. And, the Xbox and all that is not a bad thing as long as it's adding visual joy and not thieving your good energy. I don't know how to say this. There's probably like a brain scientist who knows what the videos do, but it's just be careful of your media diet for the young folks.
I love that point, especially as a person who grew up with a smartphone. I find myself reaching for my phone and just opening up Instagram and just scrolling, and that mindless scroll is something I think we're all culprits of. As much as I don't want to, we have to wrap this up because we get to hear from Shalini in her TED Talk next. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Shalini, so much for participating here. And thank you all so much for attending this panel. We can move back to the YouTube live stream for Shalini's talk, which will start in about a minute.
Can I plug Shalini as a teacher because I've learned so much from her, and she has classes and a whole thing, and she's brilliant. She's caring. Every time I talk to her, she makes me think something new that I remember. I just had to fit that plug in. Sorry.
Oh, thank you so much. And I didn't pay Kristen to do that. And, yeah, so she's pretty awesome. And just one last thing, that this has to be continued. This was just amazing. And I'm seeing some comments over there that there's a real need for this connection in this way. So thank you so much, TEDx Amherst, for making this happen in the middle of COVID. Woo!
I'm so glad we could be a part of this. Okay, I'm going to drop the YouTube live stream link in the chat for anyone who doesn't have that up now. Go ahead and navigate there, and we'll get to hear Shalini's wonderful talk all about mindfulness. So it's kind of continuing this conversation. Until then, thank you so much again. I'm so grateful. I have so much love in my heart. And I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you all for coming.
My name is Nathan, Head of Partnership for TEDx Amherst, and I'm so excited to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Shalini Bal. A successful entrepreneur and mindfulness educator, Shalini is an award-winning researcher, keynote speaker, and Amherst Town Councilor. Shalini's experiences of living and working in India, Kuwait, and the US allow her to engage with diverse audiences across all walks of life, ranging from CEOs and executives at Fortune 500 companies to students at Eisenberg Management School at UMass Amherst. Founder of Know Your Mind training, Shalini offers customized coaching based on 15 years of multidisciplinary research across the fields of neuroscience, psychology, and management to help her clients reduce stress, become more resilient, and live more empowered and fulfilled lives. Her guided meditations on the Insight Timer and Simple Habit apps have been listened to over 250,000 times, and her upcoming book explores the mindfulness skills we can use to disrupt our default thinking and transform the way we live, learn, and lead. I invite you to turn off your cell phones and any distractions because this is a talk you will absolutely want to hear. So, without any further ado, Dr. Shalini Ball.
Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Rumi. I always believed in that field, but I didn't know it was for me. And had it not been for that one difficult decision 23 years ago, I wouldn't be standing here. So one quiet morning, when everyone was asleep in the house, with one suitcase in hand, we tiptoed down the staircase to the car. My husband was dropping my two and a half year old son and me to the airport. We were going to Kuwait to visit my family, and we did that every year, except this year was different. I wasn't planning to come back, and I hadn't told anyone in the family about it. I wanted a divorce, and that was a really difficult decision. I'd been avoiding it for 6 years. I remember crying in the bathroom quietly, and then stepping out and being a good mom, being a good mother, a wife, a business person. And I kept doing that till I numbed out and I couldn't do it any longer. On that particular day, I walked away from that life. And it wasn't until many years later when I came to the United States with my son and experienced mindfulness that I realized that all my life I had been living on autopilot. I wasn't aware of the choices I was making and why. How about you? Are you aware of the choices you're making that are on autopilot? Are you aware of the decisions you make, like the career you've chosen, relationships, your choice of school? Now, I used to teach marketing, and on the first day of class, I would ask my students, why are you here? And you know what? Many of them didn't have an answer for that. And now, if you're thinking, that's not me, I'm deliberate, I know what I'm doing, stay with me. So once I started researching mindfulness and consulting people around the world, that's when I realized it wasn't just me. We're all living on autopilot. And in fact, there's a seminal paper called The Unbearable Automaticity of Being. And in that, the authors claim that up to 95% of our decisions are made unconsciously. So what that means is that even the big decisions, many of our motivations, judgments, emotions underlying those decisions are hidden from us. Now, there's a good reason for that. You see, we have limited cognitive resources, so the brain tries to automate everything. And that's a good thing, right? Because we don't have to relearn how to write, how to read, how to drive, brush our teeth every day, except the brain automates or wants to automate everything, including our conversations with loved ones and how we deal with conflict at work. We like to create shortcuts to most of our decisions, good, bad, right, wrong. I like to think of that way of thinking, this autopilot way of thinking, as the treadmill. As we grow up, we tend to spend more and more time on the treadmill. Now, when we were children, we actually spent more time in the field beyond wrongdoing and right doing that Rumi talked about. We had creative minds, curious minds that were willing to play with ideas, to connect. And in that space, there was imagination, there was creation, there was connection and magic. And even as adults, we have that capacity to return to that field, to that spacious mind that is free from stress, from distractions, from judgments. And I like to call that spacious mind our field within. Now, you may have experienced that in a flow activity like skiing or painting or playing music. And you know what? It's also there in the ordinary moments, like when we hear the birds sing, or I personally love to dance under the stars. And you know what? We don't have to do anything special for that. This capacity is in us, in all of us, like right now. So let's try this together. If you already have a way to return to your field, I encourage you to do that, or please join me. So just taking a moment to return your attention inwards, lowering or closing your eyes, if that's helpful, and just becoming aware of this breath moving naturally in and out of your body. Now with each in-breath, feeling the spaciousness in your chest, and with each exhale, allowing your shoulders to drop down just a little bit more. For this next breath, letting go of your judgments and expectations of how this moment needs to be, and seeing if you can receive the gift of this breath in this moment. And when you complete that cycle, opening your eyes, were you able to let go of your judgments and distractions and reach your field within? And if you didn't, that's okay. And that's actually the challenge we have, is that we're not able to reach that field within when we want to. And I'm here to tell you that mindfulness is your capacity to step off the treadmill and return to that field within. Mindfulness is a practice. It disrupts our autopilot thinking and supports us in returning to our awareness, the field within. And mindfulness is also the field of non-judging awareness that actually allows us to see things clearly. So if it's a natural capacity, why are we not able to access it? Because there are three hindrances or three tendencies of the mind: to push, to pull, and to run in circles. Now, I thought I knew what this was about as a mindfulness teacher and as a researcher, and it's only when I joined politics that I really understood what these hindrances were. So I remember my first political debate when I was running for town council. I was waiting in line with 5 other candidates, 100 people packed in a library waiting for us. And my campaign manager comes over, seeing my nervousness. "You know mindfulness, you know what to do." And I'm like, I have no idea what mindfulness looks like in this moment, because my heart was beating really fast, my mind is jumping from topic to topic, and I was feeling like really anxious. So I take a deep breath in. So that helped some, and then came in doubt. I don't belong here. I didn't have any experience in politics, and some of the candidates had many years of experience. So I pushed my negative thoughts away with some positive thinking and breathing. And at the end of the debate, my campaign manager comes to me and says, "You were not yourself, And you know what? He was right, because I was so disconnected from myself and the audience. So in that one critical situation, I encountered all three hindrances. My mind was running in circles, I was pushing away what's uncomfortable, and I was grasping for audience validation. So what happened here? Well, public speaking is hard. And even though I do this a lot, what was particularly difficult about that situation was that it was different. It was a new context for me. So what happens is that when we go into situations that are difficult, our brain goes clunk and it sees that as difficult. And it's natural in that situation for us to experience anxiety, nervousness, and that's actually a brain preparing us to get focused, to get energized. But it feels uncomfortable. So what do? We turn away from it. We avoid it with positive thinking, with breathing, Netflix, whatever. And what we're really doing is we are turning away from ourselves. We're turning away from how we're feeling, what we're thinking. And you know what else we're turning away from? From our purpose, from our passions, the gifts that we wanted to and could bring to that situation. And that was the reason I felt disconnected from myself. And because I wasn't connected to myself, I couldn't connect with the audience. So the invitation here is that we are willing to meet ourselves with the good and the messy. And when we do that, we are able to examine our emotions and our thoughts with kindness. And we're able to see, to look closely what's true and what's our default. And you know, when I did that in the subsequent debates, my campaign manager came and told me I was 1,000 times better. And you know what? How much better can our lives be? 1,000 times better if only we can learn not to avoid the discomfort and to be able to return to ourselves. However, we never grew up learning how to do that, right? And here's where mindfulness comes in. Mindfulness can be practiced with 3 steps: meditate, contemplate, and act. So the first step is to meditate, which is returning to our non-judging awareness. The meditation allows us to retrain our brain to focus on the object we've chosen. So it could be your breath, your body, movement. And here's the thing. You can even do this with any regular activity like swimming or running or Zumba. And in fact, I encourage people who have a problem or difficulty doing sitting meditation, to try any of these activities. The second step is to contemplate. So once our mind is stabilized, now we can contemplate, what is my experience right now and what are my intentions for this situation? We can ask ourselves, what's here now and what would I like to see happen? What's important right now? And the third step is to act. It's not enough to just have good intentions, right? So the more we can practice acting skillfully in non-critical situations, the easier it will be to act skillfully in critical situations. Now, you can see why it is really important to think and re-envision mindfulness to include meditation, contemplation, and skillful actions. Now, I forget this all the time, and I need reminders. So I put these sticky notes around and I put timers which remind me it's different, not difficult. And now at this point, if you're already pushing this idea away because it seems hard, and you're thinking like, wait, I'm supposed to meditate and do what? Let me just remind you, and you can remind yourself, even for your practice, it's just different, not difficult. And the more you do this, what was different becomes the new default. as a society, we have many big decisions we need to make. As we come out of the pandemic, we can step back on the treadmill and we can forge our way forward. Or we can return to the field together. I understand there's an urgency to get back to normal, but the pandemic has forced us to see normal is broken. We have insurmountable challenges: racism, poverty, climate change, to name just a few. Staying on the treadmill mostly provides us quick fixes, efficiencies, and strategies that favor some but not others. We need a new way of thinking. We need a new way of working together, of finding solutions that emerge when we're willing to struggle together. I believe that mindfulness builds our collective capacity to move through our resistance and return to the field together. And in this space, there's creative potential to solve any problem. Maybe not right away, but it supports us in making this journey together possible and even worthwhile. Moving forward, when you encounter difficulty at home, at work, or in the community, remember, don't walk away. Return back to yourself and remind yourself and each other, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. Let's meet there.
My name is Achutin Panikit, and I'm the Director of Speakership at TEDx Amherst. Maria Guarino is a teacher and advisor at the Center for New Americans in Northampton, Massachusetts. She holds a master's in Hispanic literature and graduate certificates in advanced feminist studies and film studies. Last year, she exhibited a collaborative video essay created with local artists and friends exploring her L space at the Anchor House Gallery in Northampton, which is now forthcoming in Disability Studios quarterly. Maria is particularly interested in the differences and intersections in spaces and the intervention of the visual. What distinct conversations does a gallery space foster about disability versus an academic one? Can we utilize images and videos of the body in distress as corporeal interventions, or do they stop at the line of grotesque, shocking, and ultimately counterproductive to a disabled narrative? Here to tell you more in her talk about exploring your L space is Maria Guarino.
I invite you all to look at these two images. How do we feel as we look at them? Are we comfortable? Do we want to keep looking? Do we wish for her recovery? Would we feel more comfortable knowing that these are pictures of me? And since I'm up here, right now, talking to you with a functioning and barely scarred face. Everything is okay. This phenomenon of discomfort in the face of disability is defined by theorists David Mitchell and Shannon Snyder as narrative prosthesis. In literature, we can observe how disability is usually remedied or ultimately removed from narrative. The character gets better, disappears, or dies. The old woman with Alzheimer's in The Notebook can't remember, so she dies. Forrest Gump miraculously starts running against all odds, shedding his leg braces and his awkward limp. He's healed, and Jenny, the beautiful, enchanting woman he's loved for his whole life, can finally love him back. But once she falls ill with AIDS, a disability so taboo, it isn't even said out loud in the film. She dies too. Snow White finds her charming, able-bodied prince and leaves the 7 disabled dwarves forever. We watch them in the film wave goodbye to her, smiling, awkward, short, exiled, and voiceless. Because in this story, as with so many others, the disabled characters have no voice. We are not comfortable just sitting with disability. So my question is, what would that be like to just sit with disability, with otherness, with else, to explore it? I took these pictures after experiencing tonic-clonic epileptic seizures. I wasn't sure why, but I felt compelled to document these moments before I was stitched up and fixed, before I was medicated and put to sleep, before I returned back to the world with a full set of teeth. I now realize that I wanted to explore my epilepsy, not just put it back into hiding. What were my body and mind experiencing? How did I feel? How did I look? It might seem strange that I wanted to document my pain, and for a few years, I never even looked at the pictures. But I didn't delete them either. And as I run my tongue every so often over my now uneven fake teeth and apply lipstick in different ways to cover my reconstructed lip, I realize that apart from the pain and shame, I have other things to explore. Like, even though I can no longer bite directly into an apple or a piece of Italian bread for fear of pulling out one of my fake teeth, I actually love the way my mouth feels. I no longer have this perfectly curated set of straight teeth, forced into obedience by 3 years of ever-tightening metal, pain, money, and maintenance. Now, my mouth holds memories. And I don't just mean because I talk a lot, although I do. My teeth are uneven and a little bit cracked. My smile is lopsided, and I will never take a symmetrical selfie. But in these differences, my mouth feels so much more like mine. And I've also discovered that when the scar on my lip is stimulated, I feel strong sexual pleasure, and it's very nice. And I remember one of those nights that a doctor rushed over with a plastic surgeon and shined a bright light over my face, and both of their eyes grew really big behind their masks. And the plastic surgeon grabbed my hand and it felt like ice. And she said to me in what I think she meant to be a reassuring tone, "Don't worry, I am going to fix you up so fast, you will never remember that this even happened. Your mouth is going to be normal again." And as I lay there in the hospital bed, I began to let my tongue explore. I let it explore these new gaps that were now in my mouth. And I moved it over the edge of my broken tooth to a new hole that was now there. And I tasted blood. And the machine next to me is beeping and beeping and beeping. And I let my tongue go back to exploring this freed up space that was now in my mouth. And the remainder of the tooth that I'm pressing against feels jagged and sharp, but also more firm. And the machine beep, beep, beeps. And the doctors and nurses and my family talk, talk, talk. and I start to notice strange things about myself for the very first time. Like, I realize that my mind is singing do, re, mi from The Sound of Music, and that it always does that when there's too much chaos, and that I like that. And my tongue keeps pressing against my tooth, and in addition to tasting salt and blood, I also feel wetness. And in my eyes, I notice that I'm crying. And I realize that after I have a seizure, I inevitably cry. And as I lay here exploring and singing and crying, I have entered my else space. And in my else space, doctors and surgeons' words are no longer law. And blood and gaps are allowed to feel nice. And social constructions of disability do not apply. My worth is not linked to my production. My beauty is not determined by the scars on my face. Now, I can go beyond the horror of epilepsy. This space captures the beauty and the confusion, the terror that I feel in that moment right before I have a seizure, the complete tranquility of the post-seizure brain, which is a calm that I have never felt anywhere else. The ecstasy and the excitement of losing control. To be clear, I'm not aiming to enter a space free of fear or negativity, because the negatives exist. As I lay there in bed, discovering new gaps in my mouth, I'm unable to open my mouth to take a drink of water without spilling blood. And it hurts. In my else space, I hurt. I ache. I mourn. But in my else space, I am able to explore my epilepsy. It is not hidden. It is not shamed. And I am not scared of learning more. And I will not forget that it ever happened. I am sitting. So I want to invite you now to think of a time when somebody said to you, everything is going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. Well, you're going to get better. This will be over soon. And somehow, these comforting words, these good intentions, maybe just didn't sit so well with you. We are not comfortable just sitting with otherness, with else. But what if we could? What if we could just sit in our else spaces? What if, instead of looking at my face, cringing, and telling me that I would forget it was ever broken, the surgeons and doctors and my family allowed my exploration of my disability and myself? What if they explored it with me? Because the fact is, no matter how hard they tried, despite the stitches and the medicines and the new teeth, those seizures are now a part of me. So instead of helping me to forget, why not facilitate a space of remembrance and radical acceptance? In your else space, you are creating a space of resistance for yourself. And you are resisting a dominant imposition of binaries. We do not have to be well or unwell, sick or healthy, pretty or ugly, productive or lazy. In our else spaces, we can thrive while being unwell. So I want to invite you now to think about your else. Pick up your pencil and write down the one thing that currently others or distances you from society. The thing that, when brought up or made evident, would make someone cringe and say, we're going to make you forget that this ever happened, or everything's going to be okay. This could be anything. It doesn't have to be a physical trauma like my seizures, although it can be. Maybe you might think about a difficult relationship that brings you a lot of guilt or shame. Maybe you struggle with depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and feel that you are not on a conducive path to healing. Maybe your else surrounds your body image. Maybe your else is about how you've been affected during this pandemic. And as we start to see signs that we're coming out of it, you aren't so excited. And maybe that scares you. Your else might be that you are just not good enough. Whatever it is, go ahead and identify it. Write it down in as little or as many words as you'd like. What might it feel like to inhabit your own else space? This is to say, what would your else space look like if you didn't have to be okay about something? If you didn't have to get better? If you didn't need to heal? What might you begin to explore? And how would that then feel? How would it feel to allow yourself to simply sit with it, to sit in your else space? You might be thinking right now, well, sitting with my else space doesn't feel good. Sitting with images of your injured face on this screen isn't comfortable. And you're right. To conceptualize the else space, I turned to Gloria Anzaldua's work, Borderlands. It's a text which describes physical and metaphorical borders. She explores the borders between Latinos and non-Latinos, men and women, queer people and non-queer people, and the very real US-Mexico border. Anzaldúa describes these borderlands not as transitional, but as a distinct space of exploration. Anzaldúa writes about the borderlands. It's not a comfortable place to live in, this place of contradictions. Hatred, anger, and exploitation are the prominent features of this landscape. This else space, this borderland space, helps show the dissonance created from the dominant binary of healthy, unhealthy, well, unwell, good, bad, and most importantly, it reveals the missing space for the unwell body and mind in our society. I do not mean for you to be comfortable in your else space, but to explore an essential missing space of resistance, a space where you can thrive. So let's create that space together, this space of resistance, the else space. So now, I'd like for you to think about a time when you felt forced into a binary. For example, people frequently ask me, how long has it been since you've had a seizure? Or say to me some iteration of, well, you don't seem disabled. And in answering how long I've gone without having a tonic-clonic seizure, or how long I have been healthy by societal standards, by seeming not disabled, I feel forced into a binary of healthy, unhealthy. So I invite you to think of a time when you have felt a similar dissonance, and to write your binary on either side of your else. By inhabiting your else space, by sitting with our elses, and refusing to comply with these binaries that are imposed on us, we are helping to redefine these societal constructs of disabled and unwell. In my else space, I can sit with my epilepsy, all of it. I don't need to be cured or to be okay. My lip doesn't need to be stitched, and I can explore my broken teeth, feeling the pain, the shame, the excitement of a seizure, the weird desire to laugh as it starts, and the immediate impulse to cry when it ends. In my else space, I am free to bleed, free to mourn, free to question. I am allowed to celebrate my body and its tricks. In my else space, I get to explore. Now take a minute to write about your else space in words or images. Represent your else space, knowing that it is uniquely yours. What would it look like? What would it feel like? How would you thrive in your else space? How would you be unwell? What expectations would you no longer have to meet? And again, I'd like to ask you, what would it feel like if you didn't have to be okay about it? What would it feel like for you if you didn't need to heal? If you didn't need to get better? As you write, go ahead and let your else space encompass your binary and your else. You are creating an in the middle of its space, a space of resistance that is not meant to be transitional, but meant to be explored and sat with. You can find joy while you are sick, while you are mourning. You can be angry while you are scared, while you are ecstatic. Your mouth can be damaged and you can feel pleasure. You may be looking at your paper and the space that you're creating, and it may look ugly or scary. It may have scars. You may have scars. And it may hurt. There is a reason that we want to quickly say, everything is okay. The L space is not a comfortable place. However, as we begin exploring these contradictions and resisting these binaries, remember that the L space is yours. It is uniquely yours. You do not have to forget about it. You do not have to hide it. In your L space, you can thrive while being unwell. Thank you.
introspect a lot. And I feel like looking at the chat, a lot of people reflect that. So Calvin had a question. Do you have any recommendations on how someone can communicate with and support a person in their L space without making them feel pressure to leave it or judged for it?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's really hard to answer because I feel like, you know, the act of sitting in your L space is not an easy one. Like even for the person themselves, if you're thinking, and you know, your L space can be anything. It can be sitting with depression or sitting with anxiety or sitting with, like, you know, I've talked like recently I've been talking to like a few different friends, like sitting with suicidal thoughts. And that's the idea of the L space is not necessarily to leave it. It's like, okay, I'm accepting that I have this. So how do you like support someone in doing that and saying, okay, like we're not going to work on healing this. Like we're not going to work on leaving this. And like really it just starts with like allowing the space and listening and validating. And like I don't, and I think also though it's not like you're not a therapist. Like so it's not to say like you're not handling that baggage either. Like, you know, it's not like, oh yeah, like if yeah, maybe everyone could mute. Like so I like wouldn't offer any advice because like the idea isn't to like we're not taking on people's baggage. Like we should still be like, okay, like if you have some serious stuff that you're working through and you're choosing to like sit in your L space, which is great, you need to get the supports to do it. Get a therapist, get a doctor, get all the things you need, get yoga, get all the, but like, you know, recently like I was reading something about introverts and it was like if you have like those people that you're depending on, that's so great. But then you should say to them before you start like dumping on them, say like, do you have like the time and energy to listen to me vent? And it's like just stuff like that, you know, like we shouldn't just be like, so I don't know, that wasn't really a great answer, but I just think it's like we can't go around like dumping our L spaces on people.
That's fair. I think when I was working with you on this, a line that really stuck with me, but two concepts that stuck with me. First one was that uh, to identify L space, I would be looking at the concept of binaries and whether I fit into this or that, and if I'm uncomfortable fitting into this or that. And for me personally, it was the concept of truth and whether or not something was a truth or a lie. And that was something I've been struggling with. And white lies used to bother me, things like that. And the second portion of the conversation, which I feel kind of is along the lines of what you were talking about, is not a rush to feel okay. And that is something that really stayed with me. I think you definitely answered that question. Storm has a question. How do we talk about disabilities without it being a barrier, but as a bond?
Yeah, can you clarify that a little bit more, Storm, if you don't mind?
Storm, you can unmute yourself if you're comfortable.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I feel that sometimes I follow this YouTuber. He is a quadriplegic wheelchair user, and he was telling about how he's talking about the situation where he's in regards to children seeing a disability as a young child learning about the world, and he was saying that just to parents just to say hi and to ask questions and how to make sure that the barrier the disability is not the barrier but as the connection of people, and how do we have those conversations and not have that be not have the how to say this the disability be the emotional heartstring, I guess, or the like the shock, and just be like, okay, this is who you are, this is who I am. How do I connect to you because you are in the world as I am in this world? And how do we continue with that mentality?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you kind of answered your like question in a really great way. Like yeah, I feel like you answered that so well. I feel like a lot of times when I know like I can say from personal experience, a lot of times when people learn that I have epilepsy, like it'll become very oh like how how do you, like, instead of asking kind of direct questions about how to navigate that situation, it's more like, how do you possibly live with that? Like, oh, you poor girl, like, oh, like, look at all these amazing things you've overcome, like, you're so smart, like, despite all of that, like, look at all this, look at all that you've created, like, things about that. But instead it's like you just said, someone in a wheelchair, for example, yes, there are environmental barriers because we are environmentally ableist society. Like, that's just true. So if you see someone in a wheelchair, you can absolutely talk about those barriers because, like you said, it would impede your interactions. And so it's totally fine to be like, oh, how could we navigate this together between you? Like 100% fine. But instead, like, you wouldn't want to be like, of course, like, oh my gosh, and look, you're still getting around, like, I feel like you've just articulated that so well yourself. And that's anything, like, you know, your all of our identities, like ability, race, like all these things, it's just like they're there and our identities are real. So when people say like it's not disabled, it's differently abled, that's not true. Our society does disable us, just like race. Yes, it's a social construct, but it's a real social construct. And like same with gender and all those things. So it's really important to acknowledge, but then we don't want to acknowledge it so much that we're not seeing the person anymore. Like, you know, that I think that's my opinion on that.
Can I add to what you're saying too? So basically what you're saying is that to acknowledge it, but don't make it the thing.
Yeah.
Make it.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much. I love it. So
I think that's such an important and good question. I think also sometimes when people, I mean, like we just said, when people pretend it's not there, I've had seizures before in front of my classes, and then people just pretend the next day that it didn't happen. And I'm like, well, it happened. We were all there. You watched me pee my pants in front of you. You're gonna want to talk about it. Let's talk about that. Like, you know.
That's like, amazing. Amazing. That's all I can say.
Something along the same lines. Kira, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Kira Anderson has a question. Does it feel like people are...
That's all I can say.
Sorry, you can go ahead and ask the question, actually. Go ahead. Something along the same lines. Kira, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Kira Anderson has a question.
Yes, thank you. I am having so much background and echo noise on this Zoom. So somebody type in the chat if you're hearing me okay. Yes, thank you. I am having so much
can everyone mute for a minute?
Somebody type in the chat if you're hearing.
Okay, yeah.
Kira, you want to try again?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right, excellent.
Kira, you want to try again?
So
I think you're echoing. Sorry.
I am echoing now. I'm sorry. It might be my computer. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I think you're live streaming it as well, so the delayed response is coming through. I think you're echoing. Sorry. I can go ahead and read your question. So the question was, does it feel like people are only focused on your illness as opposed to who you are? Illness or disability does not identify us or should not identify us. It's a part of us, or it makes us who we are. So would you like to talk to that, Maria?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of going along the same lines of like what Storm was saying. And I think kind of the idea of the else space is like yes, I have a medical disability, but what you were kind of saying actually was like, there are so many things that can disable us. So like, I am talking about like a physical and mental disability, but there are so many things that are not like, you know, like that aren't pathologized that are still very much disabling like by society. So like well, I'm talking about something that yes is a medical disability, but like the else space can still be like very much applied and explored through things that aren't a disability, but that people still really want to heal or like erase. And I think that's like kind of the power of like exploring this. So it's like, you know, like what you were saying is like just kind of this idea of binaries and like
we just have this tendency to really want things to be okay and to really want things to not be messy. And so like when we go through this space of being unwell or things not feeling, not having closure, things just not feeling right, that just doesn't sit well. And I think that's kind of like yes, epilepsy is a disability, but I think other things can be disabling as well. So like yes, but also I think the else space like applies in other places too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. There are some things in the society that are already labeled as big disabilities that we constantly talk about and bring to the forefront of every conversation. And we start off with that, we sympathize with that, and everything else follows.
Yeah.
Whereas there are so many other disabilities out there that still kind of prevent people from being their true self. And we either don't recognize that, or when we recognize that, we don't value it.
Yeah, I think there's just much power to like exploring exploring that discomfort and like and they're just as valid, it's not a competition for sure, but like I wouldn't want people like I use like the physical disability because it's an easy example, it's also a visible example, but there's so much to epilepsy that's not visible, and also like two other things that we're struggling with that really is disabling, and the construct of disability goes far beyond our physical disabilities, and so it kind of gets into like a weird like messiness, but I think it's just really worth exploring like that space of like discomfort even when it's not a disability. I think this goes like very far beyond disability, but like to answer like Storm and Kira's question, like absolutely, I feel like as soon as I kind of pull out the epilepsy card, people are like, oh my gosh, like you're an epileptic.
The conversation completely changes.
Like I definitely like yes to answer those questions for sure.
We have another question in the chat by Iona Murphy. What steps can we take to challenge the narrative which suggests disability has to be overcome, and the almost romanticizing narrative of overcoming disability?
Yeah, it's a huge I feel like it's the main narrative that, like, thank you for that question, Iona, and thank you for saying that about my talk. And I think that's the main narrative in our society, and I think it's really problematic. And there is this disabled scholar and also disabled person named Eli Clare, who talks about what he calls an ideology of ability. I'm just going to put it in the chat for anyone who's like interested. Ideology of ability, and his name is Eli Clare. And basically like, oh, I'm sorry. Well, he does say that, but he also calls it ideology of cure. So like, he basically says like, there are so many people who were born with disabilities, right? Or who, they've always had a disability. So they've always been like this, right? And so people who think they would be better off like cured or healed, it's like they think they'd be better off like the way they were before, right? Like in a state they were before, but they were never like that, right? It's all they've ever been. So it's kind of like, it really makes absolutely no sense. So like and I feel this way like about, like myself included, like I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was 10. I probably had it before then. I've never known like what it's been to not be epileptic. And so like, people kind of with this hopes that I'll get better, it's almost insulting, it's kind of like, well, I'm fine, like I'm doing fine, and also like, why are you hoping so much that like I'll be better? And an ideology of cure is kind of saying like, you'll be better before, but if before you never were cured, like you never were healed, then basically it's kind of saying like, you're not really, as a disabled person, you're not really valuable. And
you're imperfect throughout is the underlying crux of it. Yeah.
And I think, kind of like overcoming this and, romanticizing like this overcoming disability, and these stories you see of like, when you see people in the Olympics or like these amazing disabled people who are doing so much despite their disability. It's very insulting. And I think it's important to try and stop those. And I think, like with this idea of L space and saying like, you can have it all. You can have the grief of not being able to do certain things or to really struggle doing certain things, and the real happiness of being like, yes, I'm still doing all of these great things. And you can have it all together. It doesn't have to be, I'm doing this despite this. I'm doing this. I'm really creative, even though I've got this going on, you know. You can just have it all together. And I don't know, I think, yeah, I don't know. I think maybe more conversations like this instead of turning to like these kind of success stories or like overcoming narratives.
Sal has a question if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me? Excellent. First of all, it was a great talk. Whenever I hear you talk about this topic, I think about, as someone who professionally and personally has had exposure into the world of the 12 steps and a lot of different fronts. A lot of times what happens there is the view of someone's progress, and I'll use my own without the details, but I don't mind sharing that, is kind of bucketed into how long has it been since, you know, you engage in X behavior. And when you talked about the time from a seizure, it's kind of like everybody wants to have that neat and comfy metric and see if you're okay or not. And I think that's really useful to think beyond that. And what I've gotten out of you talking about this is, I know in my own life, I've done some of my greatest accomplishments when in the midst of problem behavior, when in the midst of, you know, quote unquote relapse. I actually wrote a book during that time, which you might know something about. So I just think it's a great perspective that can really be applied to just a core level of acceptance of that else without having to do anything else. And I think that's really refreshing because it's not common, and I think it's really helpful. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Anita, do you have a question? I see a raised hand.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Sal. I see you laughing. All right. This is my question. First of all, Maria, I'm in awe of you, as always. Your ability to take these concepts and make them mentally manageable through your words is just a tribute to the way you frame things. And I love the idea, and I approve of the idea, if you care, of embracing your else space with regard to things you cannot change. I'm wondering if there's ever a time when you have to kind of respect the discomfort as a form of being told by the universe that it's time to make a change. So when can you not afford to embrace your else space? When do you have to look at those feelings as messages?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid and good question. I think, yeah, I mean, I feel like, yeah, I think that's powerful, and I think that's what's so scary about the else space, because I think that when you start to like surrender to it, or when you start to like enter it, you're like, oh, this is very uncomfortable. This is not like, I don't want to sit in this. This is not okay. You know, this is not okay. But I feel that if you don't sit in it, then you can't get the benefits of it. Like, you know, like, so I recently had like a very rough time because I'm on a new seizure medication that's very uncomfortable. It has very bad side effects, and I was very like, I got very upset, and like I had kind of like a breakdown. I was like, I can't sweat. Like I get very hot, but I can't sweat, and it's getting very hot here, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I was just like, and I finally just kind of like, you know, like I broke down. Like I got so upset. And I feel like if I, like, the reason I'm explaining that is I feel like if I didn't finally break down to how I was feeling and just kind of have like the breakdown, you know, like the cry, the like, why do I have to have this? Why am I on this medicine? Why do I have to like go to another doctor, change another medicine, like, and just be really angry for like a couple days and just, you know, like just really surrender to like being in the space and being like, this is really not okay. Like, then I wouldn't have been able to like move forward with the steps that I really needed to take. And that doesn't make it okay. I'm still really angry about the medicine, but like, I honestly feel like if I had just been like, it's fine, like, it's fine, like, it'll be okay, then I wouldn't have been able to kind of move. I wouldn't say forward because the L space isn't about progress. That's not the point, but it's about like, I have to have the negative emotions. I have to feel them. I have to feel the discomfort in order to like, to feel everything else and in order to have everything going on. And I just feel like every time with everything going on, until I surrender to all the negatives and all the reality of what I'm really feeling, I always just get stuck. And I throughout my life, like I've just always found that to be true, especially with the epilepsy stuff. So I mean, that's really the best way I can kind of say it. It's like I have to get really deep into it, in all of it. And it's not comfortable. It's very ugly, but then it ends up being just so necessary. So I feel like that's, to me, like the very universal, like I've always found it to be right. So it's kind of my long rambling answer to that.
No, thank you. And that's why it's work. Thank you.
I think what I got out of your talk, Maria, was that it takes away that state of helplessness when, like you said, there was never a phase in your life when you were not epileptic. So when people say you get better and that state never existed, it puts you in that place of imperfection throughout, and you can easily fall into helplessness. And I think L space takes care of that. But along that line, there was a question in the YouTube chat. Alex let us know of that. How does the idea work with chronic pain? Physical chronic pain.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. I would say along the same lines, because again, chronic pain, it's not something that's going to go away. And so like with this constant thing, especially with chronic pain, like people, the L space, you have to remember, you don't have to, this is just a suggestion, you don't have to enter the L space if you don't want to. But the L space is about societal constructs, right? So the L space is about resisting what people want from you and what people want to impose on you. So like for me, like what I find so comforting with the L space is that like people want me to be okay and people want me to be better, and I need always, like I need a refuge from that, and I need to know like that I can have a space to not be okay. And so like specifically for epilepsy, which is never going to go away, it's not just epilepsy, but that's the example I'm giving you. I need to have a place where I can be all of the things. For chronic pain, the same thing, like where can you be in pain? Because with chronic pain, like when people ask you like, how are you? Sometimes you're very, very not okay. And people are going to grow very quickly tired of hearing that. I mean, you hope that they don't, but sometimes like when people want to have a really great time, or people are just looking to have like sometimes they just don't want to hear it. And so like your L space, you cannot be okay. You can be in pain, but just because you're in pain and you can explore that, it doesn't mean your life has to stop. So like you cannot be okay and you can explore that. But just because you're not okay, it doesn't mean that everything else has to stop. You can allow yourself to not be okay, but other stuff can happen too. And I think it's the initial surrendering of that and being like, I'm not okay. I'm in pain again. And then it allows you to be like, okay. For me, at least, that's how the L space has functioned for me. Like, okay, third day in a row, epilepsy's still bad. No one wants to hear that. And that's how the L space has like given me comfort, even though it's distinctly uncomfortable.
I'd like to ask a question of my own, and I thought this was touched upon in your talk, but it might really help, given that this goes far beyond just a few examples that we've been talking about. How can we really identify L space, our L space? And I think piggybacking off something that was already asked, how do we know that it's just not us conforming to discomfort and not pushing ourselves through something that we probably can or probably should in order to achieve what we want to, um, versus the other side, which is something that we can't really help?
So, okay, yeah. So your question is, right. So like, how do we know if we really should be engaging like in this L space and like this?
Yeah, how do we identify our L space using that? So just we don't miscalculate, and I I don't sit in discomfort and make that my L space when in reality that is not the conflict that's really stopping me. It's a conflict somewhere else. So how do I correctly identify what aspects of my life I need to be okay with discomfort?
Well, I think that we can I think that we can be okay with discomfort everywhere. I mean, like I don't think that, I think that if we're actively exploring and being intentional, I think if we go back and we think about that question, we think about that time when someone's told us that everything's going to be okay and we didn't like that, or if we think about a binary that we've been kind of forced into that we're not comfortable. If there's any time that we felt uncomfortable being forced into something, there's something that needs to be explored there. Your space could be temporary, but like if there's a time when you felt forced into a binary, that's worth exploring. Eventually, maybe you want to grow out of that, but like I don't think anything should ever be set. So like, maybe eventually, like you want to grow back into not being super comfortable with white lies, but I think the L space is the point of that is to resist that imposition. Ansel Dua, like the woman who I quoted from who wrote Borderlands, like she challenged all binaries, queer, not queer, Latina people, not Latino people, men, women, and that's okay. She ultimately identified with most of those categories, but it's fine to challenge them. And it's fine to be like, well, who am I in those categories? And what does that mean? So exploring those, so Kira's saying, yes, like our society pushes us. And so like, it's fine to push back and say, well, who am I in those? And maybe you're more towards one and not the other, but like to explore those spaces, nothing bad can come out of that. I think that's like a good place to probably, nothing bad can come out of that.
Yeah, because I think the conversation in the chat is really good. I know a lot of you can relate to it as well. We grew up hearing how we need to push ourselves through things. We need to be the best in everything, like Kira was talking about, and walk off pain. 2 weeks ago, I was playing soccer with a friend, and he injured himself. And it's like, if I convince myself there's no pain, there is no pain. It's like that's not how broken bones work. It's that thought process that is prevalent in the society, and we carry on. It's really hard to force ourselves to take a step back and say, it's okay to not be okay. I don't know how to get to that place though. I know how to challenge those things, and some things that have been taught to challenge, say with religion, with politics, those kind of binaries. I think for years I've been hearing that I need to challenge them. So I am appalled at people who don't challenge them. But there are a lot of aspects in my life that I'm still not willing to challenge. Is there a way I can like figure that out? Is there a way I can sit down and think about it?
I think you could start with your L space. And yeah, I mean, I honestly think that realizing that like all of these categories are constructed for you. You aren't naturally any of these things. not to get like too like Judith Butler on you, but like, I mean, you don't have to, all of these things are a choice for you. So like, you don't have to, all of these things are your choosing. And I think that's kind of empowering. So to realize like, yeah, you don't have, you don't have to walk off a soccer injury. I mean, that's, and rounding that back to disability though, I think that's why it's so important to realize like, yes, epilepsy is recognized as a medical disability, but so many other things really are disabling. And that's why we should kind of play with our categories a little bit.
All right. That's all the time we have for questions. And thank you so much, Maria, for a beautiful talk and a very powerful thought to continue our journeys with. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating and asking the questions. Please stay tuned. Bye.
Thank you all so much for attending today's fabulous schedule of events. My heart is so full, and I'm grateful to be having interesting conversations and watching people engage on the YouTube chat and social media and during the panels and the Q&As. Again, I'd like to thank the Eisenberg School of Management, the Center for Data Science, the UMass College of Engineering, Bueno Isano, Amherst Works, Guayaquil, Own Practice, and Cabot. I'm so grateful for these companies and organizations and the support that they've given us. I'd also like to thank everyone on the TEDx Amherst team for all the hard work that they've put into this, in addition to school, jobs, and a pandemic. TEDx team, you are some of my most valuable friends and peers, and you have kept me sane throughout the past year. It has been so fun working with you and laughing with you and playing with you, and I really don't want this to come to an end. Tomorrow is day 2 of the Re-Envision event, and it also goes from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., just like today. The schedule can be found on our website if you want to see what's in store for tomorrow. For those of you who purchased VIP tickets, we will be drawing raffle winners tomorrow at the end of the day. And we'll also share what is in store for those raffles. There's some really, really cool prizes. The last thing we have on the schedule today is a 30-minute networking block. The link will be in the chat below in the YouTube chat. And it's also in the email you received this morning, and it's also on our website. The networking platform we're using is called High Fidelity. It's audio only, and it's this aerial view of a pool party. And you get to move around this virtual pool party, and as you get closer to people, people's avatars, then you will hear their audio pick up on your device, and you can have little conversations. So it's this cool immersive networking experience. Lastly, I'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you. I hope you enjoyed today's program, and I'll see you all tomorrow.
You